Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get Out a Rap. Today, I'm joined by a lovely human being. He's a bit too good at chess. We'll get into that. And someone I've got to know really well through the team leader community. But I'm very pleased to introduce Jamie Corbett, who is head of operations at Advantis Credit. Hello, mate.
Hi, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks, and great to see you. Let's get the chess out the way. Jamie and I both like chess. Jamie's good at chess, and I'm not, so he's beaten me online quite a few times. Um, but we are here to talk about. Uh, I feel like I've had a kind of ringside seat recently to see your rise in your career and just get to know how competent and thoughtful and engaging you are. But where did it all start? This kind of journey in contact centers for you?
So, a contact centers really, I fell into it by accident, to be honest. I never intended on having any kind of career in a contact center. And it was around about 14, 15 years ago. I'd come out of another career. I was actually a plumber by trade, gas engineer. And I'd done that since I'd left school. So I'd been on building sites, and that was very much the industry that I was in. And through one reason or another, the recession, etc., happened. I found myself without a job, and I was walking past the building that I'm in now, and there was a banner outside, and I needed some money, some holiday spending money, because I was going on holiday in about 4 weeks. So I thought, how hard can that be? Answering the phone. Disclaimer: it's actually quite difficult, but yeah, I applied. And the following day, I was in an interview. The day after that, I was in a training group. And within a week, I was let loose on the Great British Public in our contact centre, and that was 14 years ago. And I've done pretty much every job in the building since, on the way up. So I'd spent 3 years, maybe 4 years on the phone, I think it was, which I actually really enjoyed. Wasn't very good at it to start with, by all accounts. And then my manager at the time harassed me into applying for a team leader role. So I did it begrudgingly and unbelievably. I'd never done any of the point of contact stuff. I'd never done any coaching. I'd never done any of the floor walking bits and pieces. And I did the interview, found myself as a team leader, and then progressed to a manager quite quickly after that. I've managed to do several different departments. I managed my way up to a head of a department. It didn't go so well, actually. It was around COVID time. And I learned some very, very valuable lessons there, which you don't necessarily see at the time. Took a bit of a step back, reassessed, and then I got the performance manager job that I had around about 2, 3 years ago, and then most recently moved into head of operations. So that's pretty much my journey across those 14 years, and all because I accidentally stumbled across a banner on a
Let
railing.
let let's start at the beginning then. Did you enjoy gas engineer plumbing work?
I loved it. I still love it now. I think about it all the time. I wasn't particularly academic. I was academic enough in school, but school wasn't a good place for me. So I never bothered with college or university, and just went straight into a building site role. And there's one thing to be said about working on a building site is you very, very quickly learn a work ethic with those around you. And that's something I've massively, massively carried through. And I still talk to a lot of people who are in the trade now, actually. But the work ethic you get from a building site is unbelievable.
And then that you mentioned something about when you're on the phones, it being more difficult than you thought. But did you say you weren't particularly good? What do you mean?
I was So the industry that we're in, you have a certain type of customer, and they aren't always the nicest. And I'd gone into it bit cocky, bit sure of myself, thinking it's answering the phone. How hard can it be?
Yeah.
Um, and I just wasn't very good at it. I wasn't very good at collecting money. I'd over assumed how easy it would have been. And I was very fortunate that I was, after about a week, no, maybe about 3 or 4 weeks actually, my manager at the time pulled me to one side, basically said like, what are we going to do? Like, you've had the coaching, you're not doing it. I'm like, oh my, I just don't know. I thought, well, what I've been very good at in the past as an apprentice is watching somebody and emulating. So I thought, right, sit me next to the highest performing person in the business. So they sat me next to this guy, Vinny. Now, in our industry, about 13, 14, 15 years ago, it was very much very different to what we're in now. And Vinny was very, very different to the type of people we were employing around then. Vinny was very calm, very cool. He was an old hippie, actually. Went to Glastonbury every year, but not for the music, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy knows a lot about growing kale.
Yeah.
Um, and he one day, so I sat next to him, I still wasn't getting it. And I wasn't good at it. I wasn't good at talking to customers. I was the kind of person that back in the day, when you phoned a takeaway, I'd rehearse phoning the takeaway. I don't know why I even applied for a call center job, but Vinny changed my entire outlook, actually. It's something I've carried through right to the position I'm in now. And for years, I thought there was a quote that Vinny gave to me that I thought was his, and I thought he was like a philosophical genius. But I've actually found it's a Dale Carnegie quote since reading the book, and it was about trying too hard. And if you're trying to collect honey, we don't kick the hive. And it instantly changed my outlook on that role. And I became really good at it eventually. I became real high performer. And worked my way up through the ranks. And I was possibly the best performer in the department for a good 6, 7 months off the back of this. But anyone going into a contact center, it's an incredibly rewarding job, but it's not going to be as easy as you think it is. I think it gets a bit of a bad rep, contact center.
Why is it rewarding?
For me, it was the most rewarding aspect of it was on a personal level. It was like I said, I gave you the example, just I used to rehearse like phoning a takeaway, phoning a taxi, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I'm sat on a podcast talking to you. Within that first 6 months to 12 months, the amount of confidence that I developed from working the phones was probably faster in my development than any other point in my entire career up till now. And that, like, I was still living with my mum and stuff at that point, and like people would notice the confidence it improved, and that was like a massive thing for me because I was being incredibly insecure. And I couldn't imagine another industry that would have done that for me than speaking to people and developing your ability to communicate with people, your ability to empathize with people. And you probably don't realize it when you first go into a contact center, but you instantly start developing your emotional intelligence, which was a really big thing for me at the time. Because I wasn't particularly in tune with emotional intelligence, but I'd say it's probably one of my stronger suits now. And probably one of the things that's projected my career the way it is. But the minute you start speaking to people and you enter negotiations with people, or you are having a conversation, whether it's sales, collections, insurance, whatever it is, the minute you get into that idea of a backwards and forwards where there's an outcome for both people, and you want to get to the best possible outcome for both parties, your emotional intelligence will just grow and grow and grow. It's a muscle, isn't it? We need to exercise it.
Mm.
And it's an excellent industry for doing that.
I completely agree. And we've spoken before about, I think it was my third job in the industry was debt management. So by that time, I was used to talking on the phone. And it's like you say, I think whether you're introvert or extrovert, the fact there's no real hiding place. You have to kind of, you're showing up every day. You're engaged in conversations with strangers, um, and you're negotiating. But excuse me, I've always said it. I think if you can become competent and do relatively well in collections, you can do anything. You can sell anything. I got coached quite early on about being too trusting, too naive. Because there was an element of I really bought into the concept that was shared when I joined was we're not chasing people. We are there to help. And actually, you've got a series of tools that can help people, but the hardest part is to get them to engage because they don't want to talk to you. They're either embarrassed or they don't care, or all of these different trying to figure out whether it is can't pay, won't pay. And I just wanted to get to this point where I could get people to use the tools that I had
Hmm.
at my disposal to actually help them, not just with the bank's debt that I was working for, but their debts across the board. Yeah, you could pro rata payments, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And some of the tools were dependent on there being like a part payment. And I would always, my team, I'd finish quite a long conversation. My team leader would say, "Oh, that sounded good. Did you get the part payment?" And I said, "No, but they are going to pay it on Tuesday." And didn't say anything, to be fair, not initially. This kept happening. Okay, Martin, they are just fobbing you off. They are not. And I was like, no, we built a good relationship and they wouldn't
Hmm.
do that. And it was that kind of, oh, wait a minute, I've got to get a little bit tougher here around your understanding of what people are like and like trying to think of their position. They might have agreed to everything, but they just want you off the phone and whether they are going to just blow the money or they literally don't have it, you've got to be a bit more savvy about people's situations. And
Yeah.
it was such a learning curve for me. It was massive.
Yeah, it's obviously different to a sales environment because it's not an iPhone 18 or whatever they're on now at the end of it, and there's not something shiny or a holiday. And I always find it really interesting that one of the things I did quite well with is I moved away from the idea of talking about money because people are incredibly precious about money.
Mm,
And instead, I would talk about time. So within X amount of time, you won't need to deal with this anymore because we'll have it cleared, etc. I always found it incredibly fascinating that people are far more precious of money than they are time. And they're happy to sit paying something for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and have that level of stress and anxiety hang over you because it's the smallest amount of money possible. Whereas
mm,
in actual fact, a really good example, you could look at paying £20 every month, which is super comfortable and it's not an issue. It's going to take you 2 years. By the time you increase that to say 40, actually half the amount of time it's going to take to get your peace of mind, which I personally think is an incredible trade-off for mental health, etc. So that was a big part of it for me. Um, and, you're right. There's tools at your disposal, and I think the industry as a whole, that particular industry around debt, people approach it with rightly or wrongly a preconceived idea of what it is.
mm.
And that's through consumption of various types of media, social media, what the bloke down the pub's telling you about, don't
Yeah.
pay them, don't pay that. And because of that, when we employ people, this is still the general public we employ. They've also got a preconceived idea of what the industry is, and it's educating them so we can educate the masses. And I'm a big believer in that, if we can get that message out enough and we can be consistent enough, you can change one person's mind about the situation.
Mm.
Every single day, you've changed the world for that one person. I can't see why you can't do that en masse and start making a big difference of it. So, and that all came from Vinny, and that all came from the idea if we don't kick the hive to collect the honey, there's no point being brash and over the top and being, bully boy tactics, etc. You don't kick the hive if you want the honey,
I
or you
love
can
it.
get stung.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you were kind of cajoled into taking that first leadership
Yeah.
um position. What was it, do you think, that they saw in you that you didn't necessarily see yourself?
Um, I'd I'd got to a position at that point. I joined a team where I was dealing with a very specific type of account, and it was account management, and it hadn't quite caught up with the times just yet. So what I did was I applied a bit of Excel to it there wasn't anyone particularly very good at Excel in the business or in the contact center at that point. And I've only got bare basic skills, but what a VLOOKUP can do for your career, I'm living proof of, right? So what I'd done is I just started managing the accounts rather than the people, and I started putting a report together off my own back that I was sending to my manager. It was going to the head of the department, and eventually it was going up to the managing director, and it started getting me noticed. And then in the management meetings, they'd obviously say, Jamie's done this piece of work, it's really, really good. There's a team leader opportunity coming up. And I'd never particularly thought of it. I'd never thought of myself as a leader. I genuinely, at that point, I loved being on the phone. I really did enjoy the contact center. I enjoyed the environment, the people around me, the job itself. Loved all of it. So my manager sat me down. It was coming up to PDR season. What do you want for the future, sort of thing? And we had that conversation, and they talked about all the things I'd achieved, and I'd got to a point where you will always hit a ceiling within a role, and I think I was probably getting there. And you almost, if I said there was a point where it's less of you were being promoted, you were just naturally transitioning to the next stage, I think I was probably at that point, so it made sense to do an application. Plus, the application was really, really long, and if I'm honest, I couldn't really be bothered with doing it. But they got me doing it in my one-to-one session, and we submitted it. And yeah, I got down to the final two with a particularly strong candidate sat the other side of me. Didn't think I would get it, and then yeah, I was given the role and the magic weekend. In fact, I didn't have the magic weekend. I had the magic evening. I was team leader the next day. Yeah, and then I was put into the contact center. Fortunately, a different part of the building. So the team I was given wasn't a group of peers that I had previously. So I was quite blessed in that sense. I was given a new team.
Can you remember that first day then? So that is a quick one, isn't it? It's kind of the next day.
Yeah.
Was it straight in? Was there any kind of lead in, or what were you thinking?
So what happened was I didn't know it was actually going to be the next day. So in all honesty, I didn't even have the evening, but I came in, I sat down, and
They were like, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah, basically, we found ourselves in a position where a team leader recently left, and they got too many FTE in that particular department. So they said, well, you've got the job, you can go over and sort of support. And I was like, okay, I can go over and support and do some coaching and bits whilst I ease myself into it. But when I got over there, the managers had already very kindly donated me a couple of agents from each of their teams. Needless to say, they were not the highest performers in the world. I believe they called them the work hards. And yeah, they just sat me down, and I honestly didn't know where to even begin. I think I spent 2 days just introducing myself to them individually. But because I'd come from a different area of the business, I think they all just assumed I was previously a manager, and I was getting all these questions. And the questions about the work was fine, but then asking me about holidays and sick pay, and I was like, oh, I've got a steep learning curve here. Needless to say, I obviously did it, but that first 3 months for anyone going into being a team leader or a manager, it's a lot to learn, depending on the organisation you work for. But it's probably the most exciting 3 months.
Mm. Did you feel at any point that you had to amend your behavior, like kind of who Jamie was? Did you feel that kind of right now I've got these people looking to me as the leader, I've got to kind of calm down on this, be more of that. Was that kind of thing going through your head?
Yeah, so I was very conscious that I was now the leader. And like I say, it wasn't necessarily a promotional thing. It was more a natural transition for me. And I think I'd matured through the contact center role towards the last 12 months anyway. and probably just life, outside of work matures you as you get older and stuff. But for the first part of my life in the office, I was probably quite close to Jim from The Office, if anyone's seen it.
Yeah.
But when I found myself in that leadership position, you can
Then you were
very,
more like
very,
Dwight.
yeah, you start overcorrecting, and you can very quickly start coming down on stuff quite quickly. Um, and I think the nuance or the beauty in the role of being a team leader is understanding the grey areas between the black and the white. So when you first become a team leader and you've got everyone looking at you, you're very conscious that your new peer group are now watching you, and suddenly you feel like you've got to prove yourself to them when you've got nothing to prove because you're brand new. You've got the people above you that put you into this position, so you feel the pressure of, I need to show them from day one I can do this. And then you've got the people below you that you've just left, all egging you on to do really, really well. And Jamie's really good, and he'll do it. And you get it from all these angles. It can be a very isolating situation to find yourself in when you first start, is what I found. And I probably did start overcorrecting myself a little bit with certain behaviours. And, wrap time, why is wrap time above 10%? Well, it's been above 10% for 2.5 years for this team. And then suddenly you crack the whip and it just doesn't sit right because you've got no relationship with them. So yeah, it's a minefield to tread.
But you did that, even maybe inadvertently, you did what I would always suggest is the right thing to do, which that just spending time getting introducing yourself, getting to know who your team is. They can get a chance to find out who you are. Because without those relationships, you could become just some person that's shouting at me, or you're some
Yeah,
person
yeah,
that I go to ask things, rather than that's my leader. He's really cool, and we,
yeah.
and had you done? Because I'm interested in when you started doing those reports. What was that born out of? When you were an agent and those reports led to, was it
It
born out?
was
What was it born out of doing it?
it was born out of. So the job that I was doing saw me dealing with more complex cases. So I'd gone from being a really, really, really high performer with super, super high KPIs, hitting all the numbers, top of all the performance metrics. Then because I was dealing with these more complex cases, well, in actual fact, as my numbers started dropping off, but in the background, I'd increased the amount of work that I was doing. So I thought at some point, I'm not necessarily saying that anyone in the business wouldn't understand and thought that he's just slacking off now. I started creating these reports so I could demonstrate, where my time was going, what extra activity I'd put into these particular things. And it was almost, it was a prerequisite to creating performance reports for agents and, efficiency reports and productivity reports. I was almost doing it, again, naturally evolved into it. So that's what that started with. And then I used to case manage quite a large load, and again through not wanting to manually update a spreadsheet like everybody else might be doing, I just taught myself how to do V-lookups and a few other little formulas from Excel. So I could then very, very quickly get this report out on a daily basis if I wanted to, compared to if anybody else started doing it and following my lead, it would take them a long time because they were updating these spreadsheets manually. Whereas now I'm this efficient machine, and I can update the managing director every morning if I so want. So yeah, it was through that. It was just through tracking and improving the processes that I was putting into place on myself, which is something you carry through into a team leader role, into a manager role, and that actually stuck. And a lot of the BAU in that particular team is now based around creating that report and those processes that I put in place all the way back then as an agent.
That's nice. That's nice. It's a little bit like my dad. Whenever we go to this little tiny town in Devon, he'll go, "I helped build that wall," and that's that kind of you've left something. Yeah, we know, Dad. We know.
I do a lot of that now. I'll drive past the house and say, "Oh, I've been up to that chimney. I did the bathroom in there, done them taps."
um, when so you're starting in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your team. Was there a leadership development program, or were you just left to it?
Back in the old regime, back when the business we're in now is not the business it was then, and no, I was very much left to it. And I was left to it with this group of managers that I mentioned that give me this team of the have-nots or the hard works, whatever they call them, and they weren't, with the exception of maybe one or two, they weren't particularly receptive. They just focused on their own teams, and I had to do it all myself. Now, one of the things that luckily I'm very passionate about is reading. So I spent a lot of time reading various books about leadership, development. It's a bit of a rabbit hole if you get into it. And this is where I spotted the Dale Carnegie thing from Vinny. So for years I thought Vinny was this genius, and then I found it in How to Win Friends and Influence People. A lot of it though is trial and error, and it's sitting with you guys and getting to know them. And you can very much one of the things that I did get in terms of development was I was told a story, and I can't remember it word for word, but about some monkeys that were in a cage, and there was a bunch of bananas in the middle. It was an experiment, I think, in the 50s. And they talked about they put a monkey in each corner of the cage, and every time a monkey went to grab a banana, they hosed the monkey down. And eventually they learned the behavior to not go and grab the bananas. So eventually they would swap one of the monkeys out for a fresh monkey, and he would go and grab the bananas, but the other monkeys would warn him, we don't do that. And eventually, at the end of the experiment, all 4 monkeys are out the cage, but none of them are ever trying to get the banana. And they don't know why they're not trying to grab the bananas. They just know it's bad. And I was given this story, and it was a bit of a revelation, because I thought, I'm just doing it the way that all they're doing it. You're stopping me doing it the way that I want to do it. And eventually, I might have been called a bit maverick at the time, a bit rogue. I developed my own leadership style. I spent time reading, learning, all that sort of stuff. There was no leadership program. And you get to a place where you do it the way you want to do it, and then other people will start to emulate the way that you do it. So self-development has been the biggest thing I've had through my career.
I love that, because I think it's a kind of it will always be something I recommend to people, is like, go and find other sources of information, books, podcasts, just find out. And then with all of those different building blocks, you can think what best suits you, take bits of it, amend it, use it. And what I think is interesting with your journey is, because I was thinking about, I called it like the bad apple team. I joined another contact center as a team leader, and they said, "Oh, we've made up a team of like 2 people from the other 8, 9 teams or whatever." And I was like, "Okay." Like by this point, I'd been a team leader, so I knew exactly.
Yeah.
They've just gone, "Oh, great, an opportunity for me to get rid of my bad apples." But joining somewhere new, by that point, I had experience of what I like to do, how I like to operate. It's a very simple example. They didn't do like morning huddles, and I used to like doing them, so I just started doing them. And they, the point I'm trying to make is that was just natural for me, and I wasn't looked upon like, they were just going, "Oh, he's new, so he's just bringing in the stuff that he's not done before." Whereas for
Yeah.
you, being sort of homegrown, if you like, it was probably more of a punt for you to try different things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So fair play to you. Did you have in your mind, like, if you were going to finish this sentence, like, I want my team to be blank, like, what did you want your team to be?
I wanted my team to be, so that particular team, the Bad Apple team, I wanted them for them, not for me. Like I never liked the idea that they were given to me based on the reason they were given to me.
Yes.
So I made it my absolute mission. Whether or not I communicated this to the team or not, I don't think I ever did. But my mission was to make them the highest performing team.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to make sure that when I went into my weekly performance meeting or my weekly productivity meeting with the other managers, and they're asking me how they were doing it and why is this happening, or oh, I'd love to have them in my team. You do the whole fantasy football thing where like, oh, let's trade. I thought, no, that's what I wanted for them, and that's what we did. We absolutely achieved it. Two of them went on to be team leaders in their own right.
I love that. I love that because what people don't realize is what a great motivator. And if your team can get it as well, of course they can. They're looking around going, "Oh, okay, I know why I'm I know why I'm in this team. I know why he is. I know why she is."
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so started at the bottom, and now look at me. You
And we
know,
grew that team. We grew that team out to I think 23 people at one point. I had reporting to me, and that agents reporting to me. Average headcount in is probably between 10 to 11 per manager. I'd go up to 22 because my attrition fell through the floor.
empire building.
Yeah, and it got to a point where I'd almost got two teams. I'd split them into A and B, and
Mm,
I'd compete them against each other and stuff. But I was always big keen from a leadership point of view. The one thing I always wanted to do, and the one thing I did understand, was about creating an environment that feels safe for them. So the reason they did well was when I first moved into the business, we had a operations manager who was very, very cutthroat, very old fashioned contact center. You're not hitting your targets, and then you start managing out. And that was rough because when I first joined this company, we'd found out that my girlfriend, my wife now was pregnant, and that was an incredibly stressful time for me. I always swore to myself, when I become a leader, I will never create an environment where someone feels unsure, unsafe, or they can't do what I did, which is be a bit rogue or a bit maverick.
mm,
So for that team, for example, it was just a case of you be really transparent and really clear about expectations. These are the boundaries. I, as the manager, as the leader, I'll put these process and controls and checks in place to make sure that nothing you do is going, bring the business down. We're not getting impacted. What I will do now, or what I want from you now, is to use the space that I've given you is to grow and come to me with the ideas. Like I'm a big believer in, well, you should remove yourself from the phone. We do it a lot in contact centers that people higher up always seem to have the best possible ideas about how to speak to customers, but they aren't doing it. And we created this environment. These 22 people constantly would come to me and be with ideas and script changes and all sorts of stuff. And we used to, I used to, if any of them ever watch this back, I'll be embarrassed. But I used to make up projects for them, and we did. There was a point. So I had the Bad Apple team as a good example, where for whatever reason back then, nobody seemed to be able to get wrap time under 10%. So I created a project, the Project Artemis,
nice.
and I took them off, all 15 to 20 of them at that point, into a meeting room that got no windows, purposely, hush hush. I created a slide deck. I created a project name, and we went through Project Artemis, and we talked about all these various things that we were going to do. I said, but if anyone ever asks you about Project Artemis, we don't talk about it. And I'd occasionally like put a slide on a wallboard and be like, oh, that shouldn't be there for other people to see. And then within about a week of doing that, the entire team got under 10% wrap one day, which was unheard of. When the following day it happened. And then we got to a point where the team was staying behind at night because the last productivity report used to be 4:30. So they were staying behind to make sure that everybody was under 10%. And they were doing it together as a team. And then we did an entire month under 10% wrap. To this day, people still talk about Artemis, and people still follow the same steps that we put in place. And it's only because they feel safe enough to start like exploring what we can do
Yeah,
and putting ideas there. Management's great. Managing people to routines and stuff is fantastic, but giving people a bit of room to grow is
I love that.
next level.
I love it. Because I similarly, I was like, oh, I've got some freedom. I've got some freedom here to do stuff. Like I can remember, and I did this with my youngest daughter. Have you ever heard of the Apple experiment? So this is way out there, okay? But there is a sensible message behind it. So I always wanted to make my team do interesting stuff with them, because the monotony of the job itself can be tough. So it's part of your role to engage with them,
Hmm.
involve them, and like you, we had a thing with about coming back late from breaks, and I got my team to understand what that meant for our welfare budget. So they started to self manage and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, I wanted to talk to them about the impact of their words and energy, bearing in mind we're all sat next to each other, and the difference between positive and negative. And there's a Japanese scientist who has done various experiments. The simplest one is the apple experiment, where you get an apple, cut it in half, and you put one in a Tupperware, half in a Tupperware box, and you write good on the top, half in a Tupperware box, and you write bad. And you keep them in the same position, same shelf in the fridge. And every day you get the good apple, take the lid off, and say good stuff to it for like a minute. Put it back, get the bad one, say bad stuff to it. Like, you're a rubbish apple. I hate you. And I documented this, and my daughter, who's now at university, she was like I don't know, 6 or 7, and I was getting her to do it. And honestly, my wife and other kids were like, "This is absolutely cringe with it." In the end, I started doing it in the garage because they were like, "My dad's talking to half an apple every day," and I took photos. And anyway, so I was telling people this in the team meeting, and the apples rot at a different rate. Like, you can go and look it up. Like, the one that you're saying good stuff to um is preserved for far longer. And I said, look, I do not know the science behind this, or if it's even if it's real, but what I can tell you is this. And I had a picture of Mia holding up the apples in their Tupperware boxes. And I said, but I think there's one thing we can all agree on, which is, if I'm sat next to someone that's constantly negative about every change in the company, customers, their life, where they're at, their performance, the job, I said, how does that make you feel? I said, you, it does impact you. You might be
Hmm.
durable and positive and last through the whole day still being okay, but there is an impact. And this shows that it might just be more than what you think. It could be everything. And in fact, I used it with my elder daughter around the words that you say to yourself.
Yep.
If you look in the mirror and you go, "Oh God, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other," that's having an impact. And it was just that freedom as a leader to be able to do stuff like this, to try different things. You can do what you want within
Yeah,
reason.
absolutely. And I think that's the beautiful thing, isn't it? You can do what you want within reason, obviously, without bringing the business down. But I just love the idea that you can grow and you can grow your team with you, and it doesn't have to be the set prescribed idea of what leadership is. Because what is the prescribed idea of
Mm,
leadership? I don't know. But the Apple thing, I've heard something very differently actually. It's the same principle, but it was around, I think it was trees or plants. And it was about playing music to them and different types of music with different types of messages. So I think one got played Ode to Joy by Beethoven, the other one probably got some gangster hip hop or something. And they grow at different rates. And I thought about this a long time ago, and it relates to the idea of when you're praising, you do that in public. If you want to grow your little garden, which is all your little
mm,
flowers sat there, where you can water them. And I believe I'm a big believer that praising an individual in public is good for everybody else around them. Till it takes a certain type of person to not be pleased for someone, and you have to be a certain kind of person. But when the time comes to have you would never chastise or you would never have a difficult conversation out on the floor. I'd always do that. Again, ideally in a room without windows because all the team are turning around, trying to guess hand gestures and stuff.
yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, but it's a great analogy. He's saying, yeah, same as the apple. You grow in a garden, you want green shoots. You don't
so
tip
you,
more compost on top of it.
how long were you team leader? And then you mentioned something. Did you go manager then head of?
Yeah, so team leader, I was team leader for about I want to say about 6 months, then I became a team manager, which essentially became the same sort of role anyway. But I did that for 7, 8 years, maybe 6 years, maybe, and then an opportunity come up to take the next step up to a performance manager head of. Um, and polarizing, or compared to my earlier analogy of I was ready to, I just naturally
Yeah.
osmosis into the team lead role. This was me getting a promotion, and this was me believing my own hype a little bit. And I took it, and I took the role, and I was in that role for about 12 months. And I learned some incredibly valuable lessons during that time. Least of all that I probably wasn't quite where I thought I was. And it gives you a good opportunity to, again, I had an incredibly high performing team before that. And you do start believing your own hype a little bit. It's just part of human nature, it's what you do. But then when you're exposed, and it's not just imposter syndrome, it's actually, this is probably a little bit more of a stretch for you. And you've only got a bit of ego to fall back on. It's time to reevaluate. So I stepped down from that and went back to team leader, back in the same department where I was. And it took me 2, 3 months. I'd gone through some personal stuff as well outside of work, which probably added to it. But I hadn't reacted as well as I could up to of it. So I spent some time reflecting. And now I can see that it was the best thing possible that could have happened to me, because I've gone beyond that role and gone up again. And I'm far more prepared. Again, this was a bit more of the natural. I was just sort of there anyway, doing it. Yeah, so it was a leap of faith, and a leap of faith doesn't always work out the way you want it to.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it can be very not glib, because it's well intentioned, but people will go, setbacks are important. Get knocked down 7 times, get up 8.
Mm,
You win or you learn. I say all these things, right? But actually, and I think it's so important for people to look at you and think, you're ahead of now. You're extremely successful. You are very thoughtful. You like growth mindset, but that is a knockback, and it's all very well having that kind of things going like, okay, I'm going to keep going. But when it's happening to you and when you're
mhm.
in that moment, I think you've got to recognize it's not pleasant, is it? You're
No,
kind of, you've gone
it
for it.
was
It's not worked. You're back.
it was probably the toughest 2 or 3 months I've ever experienced in work. Um, yeah, and people always be like, oh, the only person who loses is the person who doesn't get back up. It's all good and well. And I'd sort of, like I said before, I got really deep in the rabbit hole of leadership books and self-development, and it's all full of that. But they're just words on a page, and as good as it is to learn from reading and all that sort of stuff, the best teacher in life will always be falling on your arse and needing to get back up. You just can't see it at the time, and you have to be in a certain place where, and it took me a while. You need to be prepared to look at what the actual issue was. And 9 times out of 10, the actual issue is probably you weren't just there. The
Mm.
person, the person who got the role after me is still in that role and done a phenomenal job with it. Better, I'm in a position now to say that they have done a better job than I ever could with that, based on the type of contract it was. I wasn't suited to it. I just got this idea in my head about progression, and I wanted it, and COVID was happening, and I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for my development, my brand, if you like, and all that sort of stuff got in the way of my actual capability of doing it. So it was a long, hard, painful lesson at the time. You just need to, as an individual, if you ever find yourself in that situation, you need to just be absolutely honest with yourself. There's no point making excuses about what has gone wrong or what you could have done better or because it's happened. You just need to learn the lessons I got really into it. I always sort of been into it, but I really, really got into journaling at that point. And I always find it fascinating that I think it was is it Tim Cook, the CEO? No, it was Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple. He made a very famous quote about you can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. And when you look back through something like that, you can see exactly what happened to get me to the point that I'm at now, at head of
Mm.
operations. And had I not had that setback, I don't think I'd have got to the point that I'm at now. So retrospective is always an important piece of anyone's career, I would say. Reflecting and being retrospective and looking at the bits that have not just gone right, but the bits that set you back.
Well, in Jamie 2.0, then that then went
Mm-hmm.
back up and is now head of operations. What's the difference between Jamie 2.0 and Jamie 1.0?
The difference, and again, it's even difficult to talk about now because you've got to be very honest about yourself. The difference was me. So the person that went into that is very different to the person now. And on that journey in between, we talked about emotional intelligence and all those bits and pieces. And what I needed to do really was sit down and understand what my actual wants were out of my career, not just titles.
Mm.
And I find it ironic now that before titles, I got to a place where I didn't want to be a team leader. I sort of got put into it by my manager, and then titles and progression became very, very important to me, almost a driving factor. Once that had happened and I'd reassessed and I thought, what is it I actually want? And, I want to come work and I want to be able to add value to the company. I don't want to take from the company. I don't want to take a title from them. I want to add something to it. So the role that I'm in now, as a great example, is at the time, maybe 12 months or so ago, it didn't actually exist. And in my head, instead of creating a promotion, I thought I'm going to create a role and I'm going to spread myself amongst my stakeholders. It's not about me anymore. It's about if I can lift everybody else up and bring them with me, I'm in a far better position to get essentially, the promotion or whatever. But even now, the job title's not particularly that important to me.
Mm.
It's seen everybody else do well. And before, I think the only way, I suppose the point I'm making is before it was about me. And that's the bit that stings when you say it out loud. Because I like to
Yeah,
think that I'm not that person, but it was
it's funny,
about
isn't it?
it was about me. And now it's about everyone is the only way I can articulate it.
I love, mate. Honestly, I love it, and I can see that it's kind of like evolving, right? And
Mm,
I can remember being the first time I ever went to the expo. I was let out as a team leader, and it really stuck with me that I didn't want to go to the expo again with just team leader on my badge, and that became a big thing for me. Like I want to, but each time that I got a new role, it still wasn't enough. I
yeah.
was like, oh, now it says contact center manager, and those moments were like fleeting. You think I'd obsessed about it, wanted it, got it, looked at it, yeah, that's nice, gone. Now I want head of. Now I want
Yeah.
this, and I'm not saying this is like right or wrong, but I think it's to your point. The moment you go from that to how can I how can I leave like positive stuff happening to the people around me and see them develop and see them do what they want to do, that is far more important, to the point that there was an event the other day. I got there, I was speaking, and they said, oh no, sorry, we haven't got you a badge. I said, that's all right, I don't care. I genuinely didn't mind. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't mind. I very rarely now know what to put on there. And it's funny how that, for me, that was a big thing that I was focused on. But like you say, it was for me. And the moment you start going thinking like that to, oh, okay, what impact can I have with this? with this role?
Well, I think the biggest epiphany for me during that time, and it's happened during around about that 3 or 4 months. And as I said, I got this other thing going on outside of work, but I'd lost someone incredibly close to me. Was as you know, in the contact center industry, we all know each other from other contact centers. I've got friends in other contact centers now. We were managers and stuff. And when I'd moved to that position, when I took that promotion, my team got disbanded, and a couple of them left the company and joined other businesses and stuff. And like I said, I'd probably done that job for about 12 months, maybe 18 months maximum. Stepped down, and I was in the doldrums. I was in that 3 month period, and someone sent me an email of a girl that I used to manage working for another contact center. It was a screenshot of an internal newsletter, and they did an interview with the employee of the quarter or something, or whatever it was. And it said, what is the best leadership lesson you've ever had? And there was my name in another company's newsletter, right? And I remember thinking, the impact, it's not about me. None of this is about me. It's about them.
Yeah.
And if I can, just one sentence that I've said to someone over a 2-year period sticks with them for more than 5 minutes, then my job is complete. And that was a big turning point, which sounds a bit naffy. I was probably had a beer at that point, but
I love it. I think this is stuff we've talked about in the past, is kind of realizing that your team are talking about you at home to their loved ones. Like, oh, what's your boss like? Whatever they say next is more important than any title
absolutely.
or personal development review or anything. It's the thing that they say next really shows who you are as a leader. And I just genuinely think I'm lucky to know you, and we are very lucky to have you in the team leader community. I love how you operate and think, and it would be good if you can come back on and we can talk more about like kind of leadership styles, because we have run out of time, my friend.
I have things to do. I'm a busy man.
Jamie, thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers, Martin.
Has he finished? Let's go.